you could say that the beliefs of the Jahmiyyah are the rejection of all the names and attributes. Rejection of all the names and attributes. That is one of their overall points of Aqidah of the Jahmiyyah. They reject the names and attributes of Allah because they believe that if you affirm them, you are comparing Allah to creation. And so, of course, their beliefs are completely in contradiction to what is in the Quran and the Sunnah. Because if you look at the Quran, the absolute majority of the Quran, the ayat of the Quran, they all talk about the names and attributes of Allah. How many ayat they finish with one of the names of Allah? The names and attributes of Allah are throughout the Quran, throughout the ayat of the Quran.
وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So carrying on then with this series of lessons where we're looking at the different groups and sects and their principles, their deviations, refutations of them. So we just finished some of the other sections regarding the Khawarij and the Rafidah. And today then we're going to start the third section, which is regarding the Jahmiyyah. The Jahmiyyah, this particular sect, they have many of their misguidances, many of their deviances in the names and attributes. In the names and attributes, in Iman, in the decree. These are some of the main areas of deviance that the Jahmiyyah fell into. The names and attributes, Iman, issues of the decree, among other things too. But these are some of the major aspects, as we'll come to see, insha'Allah. So the Jahmiyyah, they are named after an individual. Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. Because as you know, the groups of deviation, they are named after who they follow, their leader, where that deviation began from, or they are named after the actual deviation itself, like the Qadariyya. So they may be named after the actual deviation itself. Sometimes they may be named after the founder of that sect, and that's what we have in this case. The Jahmiyyah, named after Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. And sometimes you might hear him being named as Al-Jahm ibn Safwan At-Tirmidhi, like Al-Imam At-Tirmidhi from the place called Tirmidh. That's the name of a place, and they are attributed to that place. And so it was from that area, Tirmidh, from Tirmidh, where this bid'ah of the Jahmiyyah started from. That's where it first originated. فينسب الجهم بن صفوان إلى ترمذ فيقال جهم بن صفوان الترمذي. ومن ترمذ ظهرت بدعته. So he is sometimes attributed to that area Tirmidh. So he is known as At-Tirmidhi, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan At-Tirmidhi. And that's where this innovation of the Jahmiyyah emanated, where it started from. And Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, he learnt what he learnt from Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, an individual by the name of Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. Because Al-Jahm ibn Safwan had come across, met with Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham in Al-Kufa. He had come across him in Al-Kufa and learnt from him some of these deviances and misguidances. Because this individual, Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, he used to reject the names or the attributes, and he used to have great deviances in that affair. So Al-Jahm ibn Safwan learnt what he learnt from Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. It's mentioned that on one occasion that Wahab ibn Munabbih from the Salaf, Wahab ibn Munabbih met or came across Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. That there was this meeting, or he came across Wahab ibn Munabbih once. And Wahab ibn Munabbih from the Salaf, he said to Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, after he talked to him about the attributes of Allah, and Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham was rejecting the attributes of Allah, Wahab ibn Munabbih said to him, وكان لقيه وهب ابن منبه وقال له بعد أن سأله عن الصفات ويلك يا جعد إني لأظنك من الهالكين يا جعد. Wahab ibn Munabbih from the Imams, he said to Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, after having a discussion about the attributes with him, he said, woe be to you, O Ja'ad. I believe that you are going to be from the ruined ones, O Ja'ad, from the ones in destruction, O Ja'ad. لولا أو لو لم يخبرنا الله عز وجل في كتابه أن له يدا وعينا ووجها لما قلت ذلك فاتق الله. Wahab ibn Munabbih said to him that had Allah not informed us in His book that He has a hand, an eye, a face, these attributes, hands, eyes, face, then I would not have said that. Meaning I'm saying that, and this is our aqeedah because Allah told us that in the Quran. And that is what you should be believing, O Ja'ad. So he said to him, fear Allah. Wahab ibn Munabbih said to this Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, fear Allah, fattaqillah. This is what Allah has informed us of in the Quran about His attributes. That is why we believe in them. So fear Allah, because Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham was rejecting the attributes. As for Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham himself, where did he learn all of this from? It is mentioned, وَكَانَ الْجَعَدْ أَخَذَ هَذِهِ الْمَقَالَةِ فيما ذكر شيخ الإسلام وابن كثير وغيرهم عن صابئة حران. ويذكر أنه أخذها عن أبان ابن سمعان أو أبان، نعم، بيان ابن سمعان أو أبان ابن سمعان، وهو من غلاة الروافض. It's mentioned that, so Al-Jahm ibn Safwan learnt all of this stuff from Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham had learnt all of this from an individual called Aban ibn Sam'an, who was from the extreme Rafida. From the extreme Rafida. So look at the chain of narration as it's going here. The Jahmiyyah attribute themselves to Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. He took from Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. He took from Aban ibn Sam'an, the extreme Rafidi. Aban ibn Sam'an, the extreme Rafidi. So much so that it is even mentioned that this Aban ibn Sam'an, this extreme Rafidi, was the first one to invent the statement that the Quran is created. They say he was the first one to say that statement, or not to invent it, but to say it, the first one to say that and propagate that the Quran is created. But then where did Aban ibn Sam'an learn all of this from? He learnt it from أخذ أبان هذه المقالة عن طالوت ابن أخت لبيد ابن أعصم الساحر اليهودي. Aban ibn Sam'an, the extreme Rafidi, learned from Talut. Talut, who was the nephew of Labid ibn A'sam, the Jewish magician. He learned from Talut, who was the nephew of Labid ibn A'sam, the Jewish magician. So look at the chain of narration for them. The Jahmiyyah, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, to the misguided and deviant Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, to the misguided Aban ibn Sam'an, to the misguided Kuffar, Talut, the nephew of Labid ibn A'sam, the Jewish magician. And this Talut, at the top of the chain of narration, this Talut, the nephew of the Jewish magician, it appears that he was some kind of philosopher. It appears that he was some kind of philosopher and he rejected the attributes of Allah. He was some kind of philosopher into his philosophy from the influences of the Greeks perhaps and others, and he rejected the attributes of Allah. So that is where that chain of narration came. Talut at the top, and then Aban ibn Sam'an below him, then Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham below him, to Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, who the Jahmiyyah call themselves with. That individual, the second one in the chain of narration, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, that individual, Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, when he rejected the attributes of Allah and he rejected the speech of Allah, it's mentioned that the leader at that time, Khalid ibn Abdullah, who was the leader at that time, he got a hold of Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham and killed him on Eid day. slaughtered him on Eid day and said to everybody, go and slaughter your animals, for indeed I have slaughtered Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. So that is what's mentioned regarding him. Because Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham, he used to claim that Allah did not take Ibrahim as a Khalil. And we know in the evidences Allah took Ibrahim as a Khalil. And he used to claim that Allah did not speak to Musa alayhi salam. And we know with the clear evidences Allah spoke to Musa alayhi salam. So Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham killed, Khalid ibn Abdullah killed Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. And that was around about 106 to 110 Hijri. 106 to 110 Hijri, there or thereabouts, is when Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham was killed. So the beliefs of the Jahmiyyah didn't start with Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. They were there before, from who he learned from Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. But these beliefs didn't become famous at the time of Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. They didn't become famous. He was killed after him. Al-Jahm ibn Safwan had already learnt everything from him. It was him that then made all of this famous and spread it everywhere. Whereas at the time of Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham and above, it was not so widespread. فهذه المقالة اشتهرت بعد على يد الجهم بن صفوان وإليه نسبت المقالة فيقال الجهمية. So even though Al-Jahm ibn Safwan isn't the originator of this belief, he took it from Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham, who took it from Aban ibn Sam'an. But in those days, Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham, Aban ibn Safwan, these beliefs didn't become widespread. It was only at the time of Al-Jahm ibn Safwan that he spread this and it became widespread. And that's when Jahmiyyah became known. ثم إن الجهم بن صفوان مع ابتداعه كان يرى الخروج على الأئمة. So Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, he has many misguidances in Aqidah, as we're going to see inshallah, in names and attributes, in Iman, in decree, in those affairs. But on top of all of that, he even had some Khariji tendencies too. He believed in rebellion against the rulers. He believed in rebellion against the rulers. ولهذا كان من ضمن الخارجين على الدولة الأموية. So in history, when you look at الدولة الأموية, etc., he was one of those who went out and rebelled against them. He was one of those at that time who went out and rebelled against them also. And there are other incidents and stories mentioned about him when he went out and rebelled against the rulers too. And Al-Jahm ibn Safwan was eventually killed. Al-Jahm ibn Safwan was eventually killed. He was captured in the year 128 in one of the battles that occurred at the time when they went out against the rulers, etc. He was captured, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, in the year 128 Hijri, and he was killed. He was killed at that time then in the year 128 Hijri. One of the things that is narrated about Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, one of the stories that is narrated about him, is مما يؤثر عن الجهم أنه كان داعية نعم ويؤثر عنه أنه ناظر ناسا من الهند لعلهم بوذيون يقال لهم السمينة. It's mentioned that this Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, he ended up at some stage in his life debating with some Indians, and it's not clear, but it appears to be the Buddhists. That at some stage in his life he came across the Buddhists or the likes of them from the subcontinent area, and he ended up debating with them. لا يؤمنون إلا بالمحسوس من الأشياء فلما لقوا جهما قالوا له نكلمك فإن ظهرت أو ظهرت حجتك علينا دخلنا في دينك وإن ظهرت محبتنا عليك دخلت في ديننا. They said, we want to debate you to Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, and if your evidence overwhelms us, you manage to establish the evidences and proofs with your arguments, we will enter into your religion. But otherwise, if that is not the case, you enter into our beliefs. So whoever wins the debate, the other one must go into their belief then. That's what they said to him. Jahm agreed with them. Jahm ibn Safwan agreed with them on that. فوافق على ذلك جهم. فقالوا له هل رأيت إلهك. So they said to him, part of their debate, they said to him, so have you ever seen your God? Have you seen Allah? Have you seen your God? قال لا. He said, no. No. قالوا فهل سمعت كلامه. They said, okay, have you heard him speak? Have you heard your God speak? هل شممت له رائحة. Or have you smelt his fragrance? هل وجدت له حسا. Have you physically encountered him? هل وجدت له مجسما. Have you come across a physical form of him? And of course, to all of these questions, Jahm was saying, no. No, I have not seen him. No, I have not heard him. No, I have not come across any physical form of him. No, I have not smelt him. They were asking him all these questions, and he was saying, no, no, none of those things, no. So when he kept saying no to all those questions, they said to him, فما يدريك أنه إله. They said to him, well then, this God of yours that you worship, how do you know he's a God? How do you know he's even a God? You've never seen him, you've never heard him, you've never come across him, his physical form, nothing. You have nothing. Then how do you even know he's a God? So it is mentioned, تحير جهم فلم يدري من يعبد 40 يوما. That after this debate, Jahm became so confused that for 40 days he was left in confusion, not knowing who to worship. He was left so baffled and confused by that debate that for 40 days he didn't know what to do, who to worship. وَتَرَكَ الصَّلَاةِ خِلَالَ ذَلك. He stopped praying. Those 40 days he stopped praying. He was so confused, his mind was gone. Didn't know what to do. Who do you worship? Stopped praying. ثم إنه لقيهم فقال لهم. Then he met those what appears to be Buddhists or their likes again afterwards. He came across them again afterwards, after these 40 days of complete confusion. And he said to them, Jahm said to them, أَلَسْتُمْ تَزْعُمُونَ أَنَّهُ مِنْ أَجْسَادِكُمْ أَرْوَاحًا. He said, don't you claim that in your bodies there are souls? those Buddhists or their likes, whoever they were, they said, yes, yes, we do claim that, we do believe that. So then Jahm said to them, هَلْ رَأَيْتُمْ أَرْوَاحَكُمْ Have you seen these souls of yours? Have you seen these souls of yours? أَسَمِعْتُمْ كَلَامَهَا Have you heard them speak? Have you seen their physical form? All those same questions again that they were asking him about Allah. He then began asking them about the soul. And they kept saying, no, no, no. So then he said to them, Jahm said to them, so likewise Allah is not seen and He is in every place and He does not have any specific place. Meaning he came back with some kind of debate with them afterwards, but the point is he became completely confused with this debate. 40 days he stopped praying, 40 days upon confusion, didn't even know where to turn, what to do, who do you worship. And so you see the kind of man he was and how distorted his mind was and how disfigured his thinking was. So this is a bit of background regarding Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. And they say that this incident, when he met with these Buddhists or what they were, and these debates he had with them, they had a big impact on him, on his deviance and misguidance afterwards. He became so confused with these debates with those people, they really impacted on his mind and completely just caused a great degree of misguidance in his mind from these debates he had with them and the confusion that was left in his mind after them. It impacted him greatly and was one of the causes of the great misguidances he fell into. So he was already misguided anyway because of what he had learned from Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. He was already misguided with all of that. But then these debates with these Buddhists, they just made it even worse. His mind became completely warped, completely upon misguidance. So that's a background to who this man Al-Jahm ibn Safwan was, who the Jahmiyyah attribute themselves to. So now then, if we start looking at some of their beliefs, if we start looking at some of their false principles and false beliefs. Firstly, one of the biggest things, of course, is in the names and attributes. In the names and attributes. So when it comes to the names and attributes, the bottom line is that the Jahmiyyah, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, reject the attributes. اشتهر عن جهم التعطيل بالصفات. That they completely nullify, negate, write off the attributes, reject the attributes. And Al-Jahm ibn Safwan is the first one where this statement is like officially noted from. Like officially noted from Al-Jahm ibn Safwan as the first person to make that belief of rejecting the attributes of Allah. It existed before that, but as the first official note of this statement, it is attributed to Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. ويقول الشهرستاني إن جهما وافق المعتزلة في نفي الصفات الأزلية. So Al-Jahm ibn Safwan agreed with the Mu'tazila. He agreed with the Mu'tazila in rejecting those attributes that are always with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes that always exist with Allah. وأنه يقول إن الله لا يوصف بصفة يوصف بها خلقه. And he would say that Allah is not to be attributed with any attribute that creation is attributed with. Allah is not to be attributed with any attribute that creation is attributed with. Because according to them, that would be making resemblance. لأن ذلك تشبيه فنفى كونه حيا عالما. So according to them, any attribute that mankind has, it cannot be attributed to Allah. Because according to them, that would automatically be resemblance. Of course, we know as Ahlul Sunnah, we've explained before, the same name of the attribute does not indicate that they are the same in their essence. Like we've given the example about the legs, a leg of a spider, a leg of an elephant, they're all legs, but they're completely different. So the attributes of Allah they have the names as the attributes we have. The names are the same, but the realities are different. But they didn't understand that. They said, no, if it's the same attribute as creation, it cannot be given to Allah. That would be resemblance. So they rejected the attributes. They rejected that Allah is the one who is living. Al-Hayy. Al-Hayyul Qayyum. They said, no, because we are living. So how can Allah be living? That would be comparison between us and Allah. We're both living. We're both the same. Of course, that is false what they believed. Aliman. That Allah is alim, the all-knowing. They said, we have knowledge. We can be alim. So that can't be for Allah. That would be resemblance and comparison. وَأَثْبَتَ كونه قادرا فاعلا خالقا. He did say though that Allah is the one who has ability and the one who creates, because he said us in creation we cannot actually create, we cannot bring things to life, we don't have that ability. So there were certain things he said, okay, that can be attributed to Allah. Certain things where he said, okay, these things we can't do as humans, so that can be attributed to Allah. But the point is, overall, he rejected the attributes of Allah. وحكى عنه الأشعري أنه كان يقول إن علم الله سبحانه محدث، ويقول بخلق القرآن وأنه لا يقال أن الله لم يزل عالما بالأشياء قبل أن تكون، وأنه أنكر أن يقال إن الله سبحانه شيء لأن ذلك تشبيه له بالأشياء. So it's mentioned about him how he claimed that the knowledge of Allah is something new. It wasn't something that always existed. And that he used to say the Quran is created. Among all of his deviations, he claimed that too. Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, that the Quran is created. And he would say that you can't say the knowledge of Allah has always existed before things come into existence, meaning deviances in the issue of the decree that we'll come to as well, inshaAllah. So many things he used to claim that are in complete opposition to the beliefs of Ahlul Sunnah. So in summary, you could say that the beliefs of the Jahmiyyah are the rejection of all the names and attributes, rejection of all the names and attributes. That is one of their overall points of Aqidah of the Jahmiyyah. They reject the names and attributes of Allah because they believe that if you affirm them, you are comparing Allah to creation. The only thing that they do affirm to Allah is that He is Al-Khaliq Al-Qadir. He is the creator, the all-capable, because He says we humans are not creators and we're not all-capable, we can't bring things to life. He said, okay, those two you can attribute to Allah, there's no comparison. But everything else they reject to Allah, they reject from Allah because they say that would be a comparison between Allah and the creation. So that is their first major misguidance, first major point. They reject the names and attributes of Allah. So now then, if we look at a brief refutation of this position of theirs, because as Ahlul Sunnah we know, we do not reject the names and attributes of Allah. We do not reject the names and attributes of Allah. We affirm the names and attributes of Allah. So إن المتأمل لكلام جهم بن صفوان في الصفات يتبين له أنه عطل صفات الباري جل وعلا ومنع من وصفه بكل صفة ثبوتية، ولا شك أن هذا المذهب في أصله مأخوذ من الفلاسفة الذين يمنعون أن يوصف الله عز وجل بأي صفة ثبوتية، وهو المذهب الذي تلقفه بعض اليهود والنصارى ثم تلقفه عنهم الجاعد بن درهم ثم الجهم بن صفوان. If you think about the belief of Jahm ibn Safwan when it comes to the attributes, so basically he is rejecting the attributes and he is refusing to attribute anything to Allah from those affirmed attributions to Allah. And of course that type of belief is taken from the philosophers. That type of aqidah, that type of belief is taken from the philosophers. They used to reject the concept of attributing attributes to Allah. And that is what ultimately they took from the Jews. Just like in the chain of narration we saw where the Jahmiyyah came from, it ends up back to Talut, the nephew of that Jewish magician. And that's where it came from. Rejection of the attributes and the likes came from the Jews, came from the philosophers. And the Jahmiyyah, that's their source. The beliefs of the Jahmiyyah from the Yahud, from the Jews, from the philosophers, that's where their beliefs came from. فهذا كله خلاف مذهب أهل السنة والمتبعين للأثر الذي وجدوا أن أكثر آيات القرآن العزيز هي في بيان صفات الله عز وجل. And so of course their beliefs are completely in contradiction to what is in the Quran and the Sunnah, because if you look at the Quran, the absolute majority of the Quran, the ayat of the Quran, they all talk about the names and attributes of Allah. How many ayat they finish with one of the names of Allah? The names and attributes of Allah are throughout the Quran, throughout the ayat of the Quran. If you look at one easy example, which is Ayatul Kursi. Ayatul Kursi. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Think about that. Go away afterwards and think about that. Ayatul Kursi. Think about how many names of Allah are mentioned in that one ayah. Think about how many attributes of Allah are mentioned in that one ayah. It is a lot. Go through that ayah carefully afterwards. Think about it. How many attributes, how many names of Allah are in that one ayah? Ayatul Kursi. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyu al-qayyum. La ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm. So many things mentioned in Ayatul Kursi as just one example of the affirmation of the names and attributes of Allah. And of course there are so many. When we did the books of Aqidah previously, the book of Sunnah, we went through examples of the attributes of Allah, the attribute of speech, for example, the attribute of some of the like hands and eyes, etc. We went through certain parts of the attributes of Allah and the evidences for that. So there are many for that. Many evidences, and those are found in the books of Aqidah when you go through them, like Al-Aqidah Al-Wasitiyah. That full book highlights the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah, and it goes through the attributes of Allah one by one, giving you the evidences for each one by one. That's what Al-Aqidah Al-Wasatiyah is. It goes through the attributes of Allah one by one, giving you the evidences for each one by one. That's why Al-Wasatiyah is such an important book. A book in Aqidah, a book in the names and attributes of Allah. It goes through so many of them. The majority of the book, that's what it is. Names and attributes of Allah. going through them all, giving the evidences for them all. So now then, if we look at some of the specific doubts that Al-Jahm ibn Safwan had and the refutation of those doubts. The first one is, the major one is that they say we have to negate the attributes, because if we don't, we are going to end up falling into making a comparison and a resemblance between Allah and the creation. They say if we don't reject the attributes, if we affirm them, then we are going to fall into making comparison and resemblance, similitude between Allah and creation. That's their doubt. They say for that reason we can't affirm them. We cannot affirm them. We're going to be making comparison between Allah and the creation if we do. This is one of their biggest doubts. And that doubt comes from the philosophers. That doubt, it comes from the philosophers. Al-Falasifa. They are the ones who came out with this type of doubt. One of the things that the philosophers used to say is that Allah is this one entity everywhere. This one entity that is in all place, in everything. And as a consequence, they said you can't describe or attribute Allah with anything. Allah is just, or God is just this all-encompassing entity. So there are no attributes in particular to mention. This was the way of the philosophers and how they think. So they would negate and reject the attributes of Allah. And the Jahmiyyah, they took on that type of belief, rejecting the attributes of Allah. But how do we refute that? So briefly, like we've said before, you can refute that firstly by saying very obviously that the name of the attribute being the same does not in any way necessitate that the reality of it, the description of it, is the same. The name may be the same, the reality and the description is not necessitated as the same at all. It is not going to be the same. And one example that proves that, somebody may say, where have you got this from? One example to prove that, the narration where it tells us that in paradise there are things that no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, no mind has ever even imagined or thought of. And yet it tells us that there are, for example, pomegranates in paradise. Doesn't it say? Pomegranates, rumman. So are they going to be like the pomegranates we have now? The rivers and the gardens of paradise like what we have here now. They are called rivers, they are called gardens, they are called pomegranates and other fruits that are mentioned in the Quran. Are they going to be like what we have now? No. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has imagined what's going to be there. But the names of the things are still the same names that we use here. The realities, they're not going to be the same as what we've got in this world. Paradise is something else. So the names can be the same, but the identity, the reality of those things is not going to be the same. And then there's the example, the logical example that Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen gave, like last time we mentioned about the word leg. You can use the word leg and it can mean so many different things, there's no comparison. The leg of an elephant, the leg of an ant, they're both legs. But they are completely different to each other, completely. The reality of those two legs is completely different even though they are both legs. Leg of an elephant, leg of an ant. They're both legs. But the reality of them, completely different things altogether. So, simply having the same name being used does not necessitate in any way that there is a resemblance and a comparison to be made between them. And this is one of their biggest problems that they do not understand. They say, no, if the name is the same, the reality of them must be the same. They're the same thing then. And that isn't the case. It cannot be the case. In that case, all those descriptions of paradise, we already know what's in paradise, then exactly what we've got on the earth. Gardens, trees, pomegranates, other things. And it's not like that. It's going to be in paradise something completely beyond what we have here. So this is the first clear explanation to highlight that their position, their thinking is wrong. Just because the name of the attribute is something creation has to, does not necessitate in any way that there is a resemblance between creation and the Creator. There's a few more, but they are going to take time to go through all of them. We'll continue with it next time, insha'Allah ta'ala. We'll finish off this section on the names and attributes, and then it's going to be a discussion regarding their false beliefs in the decree as well. Their false beliefs in the decree, and we'll go through their beliefs and we'll go through the refutations of that too, insha'Allah ta'ala. Note though, there is now coming up to Ramadan, it's going to be a little bit disturbed. Next weekend I'm not here, so it won't be on. The weekend after that I think it's on, and then that's it. It's not on till after Ramadan after that. So 7th of February, 8th of February I think it works out, something like that. That one is on, 8th of February. Next week it's not on. 8th of February I think it works out on a Sunday, that's on, and that's it. After that then we have the Umrah trip, etc. Then Ramadan comes, and so it'll be after Ramadan then. So just one more session insha'Allah on the 8th, I think it is Sunday the 8th of February insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.